And ko Waitakere ngā maunga, ko Waitemata te whanga, ko Tamaki Makaurau te whenua nei. Ko Ngāti Kuini, Ngāti Karaiti, ngā iwi, ko Aiden tōku ingoa. Oh, and ko te kura Dilworth te marae. Kia ora, I think it's about 60-40. Most of you have met me a few times, so I'll skip over this. I think I'm going to make a few people quite happy in that, thanks to some of the previous presenters and just the fact of where we're at in the adventure activities kind of cycle, I can maybe catch up a little bit of time for you. So that's a conversation starter. If you want to talk about some stuff, come see me. That'll do for a start. The outline is short and sweet. Legislation update. Can you read it? Yep. Moving on then. Not a lot to say from my desk at the moment in terms of legislation. You may have heard that the maritime rule, which requires whitewater rafting to be audited and registered by Maritime New Zealand, has now, Minister's made the decision to revoke that. It will therefore default over to being under the adventure activity regulations. I understand for most of you in the room that's unlikely to have a sort of operational impact, but many of you either have due diligence where you're checking on providers, whitewater rafters who provide a service, or you may be feeding this out to, for example, schools, that they can expect the certificate to change. There may be some less lead time on the certificates in future. So just during this transition, it's legit if the operator is saying, well, I haven't got my new certificate yet. And the other one, similar situation, I don't imagine there'll be a huge amount of direct operational impact, but if you're aware of the amusement devices regulations, 1978 or so, they are being rolled into a review and update of the plant and machinery regulations. They'll become the new Health and Safety at Work Plant and Machinery Regulations 2000 and whatever it eventually turns out to be. Similarly, if you have due diligence requirements, you might be going to rein those in for its outstanding educational value. There'll be some minor paperwork changes there. Short and sweet, eh? Gratuitous wilderness photo, just because.
Nice day.
Closer to my remit, I guess, with the adventure activity regulations and the adventure activity operator registrations. That's what the AAO is, if that's not familiar. You will see on the Support Adventure websites some updated activity safety guidelines. If you're in that world, you will already know that they provide the good practice that an operator gets audited against. So relatively specific details on what they should be doing in the field, shows in an ASG. There's some new stuff going on in terms of how that's structured and presented. I'm really keen to hear feedback from anyone and everyone in terms of how you see this working. Please dive in and have a look at some of the generic stuff which has been moved to currently grouped with the mountain biking, so that's generic and bike specific, but the generic can be looked at next to the remodeled ASGs. You can also take some of the generic information from the rest of the Support Adventure website. Really keen to hear feedback. The other comment on that, this is where I thought I had my notes, but that's okay, is that, so WorkSafe, well, the Department of Labour as it was, but the Health and Safety Regulator was closely involved in steering the ASG project as a transition from no registration requirement into the registration requirement and auditing requirement under regulations. The concept, the model was that the sector is able to develop this information itself. WorkSafe is currently staying involved quite closely, and I wondered if that was something that the sector wanted to reflect on, is how do you set yourselves up to make good on that promise that we, because I was sitting at the tables as an operator back in the day, the promise that we made was, hey, we can basically self-manage. You just need to listen to the reputable sector leaders who can set an appropriate bar for those that need to lift their game. And it's not quite self-managing yet. I think it would be healthy for the sector and for the credibility to move closer to that. That may involve thinking about who needs to be at the table that governs it, open to comments and feedback, discuss amongst yourselves, sing out. Not now though. And just one fairly small detail again, with mountain biking, if you were around at the time, 2013-14, the Dead Tree guidance document had some comments that suggested mountain biking was not an adventure activity, full stop. It's never really that simple. So in case you missed it in the last, 5-6 months or so, the updated guidance under the updated Overall Health and Safety Act has clarified that there is no sort of blanket, arbitrary, but don't worry about biking clause. It never really was there. So if your biking looks kind of like that, it's almost certainly going to be an adventure activity, or if your provider's biking that you're using. You will never find a nice, pithy instructor perspective on what's in and out on that website, because you just can't get it past the communications team and all of the other stakeholders in the organisation. If you want something that I probably shouldn't say, come and see me later. What have we got next? So I can skip through these as well. I think it's a bit of a really easy one in terms of this is in relation to the audit standard. So we have the audits being carried out against the New Zealand Safety Audit Standard for Adventure Activities. It's a locally written and maintained document. The evidence from the system is that it seems to be doing the job. However, it's completely unheard of when you are based in, Europe, Dublin, and you bulk book hundreds of cruise customers into tours in New Zealand. Again, it's a little bit off to the side of most of your world. I don't particularly see any difficulties with saying that the ISO, what's the number, Grant? 21101, which is an adventure activity standard. From my desk, it looks reasonably straightforward that can run side by side with the New Zealand standard for those operators who want to have that internationally recognised TLA, the three-letter acronym up there. However, initiating something like that is not really what my job is supposed to do. It's a lot easier to kick that into play and to get it tidied away quickly if the sector is telling government, telling WorkSafe at least, hey, this would be a good idea for some of our partners in the sector, we don't object. Preferably they've already put it in writing that they want it, and it comes together as a nice tidy package. That can happen pretty promptly. If I hear it and I can see the merits, but I can't nail it down to something other than a random administrator at a desk saying, oh, we should change stuff, it's kind of hard to support the sector. Okay? Discuss amongst yourselves or not as you see fit. Competency and qualifications, fascinating that this came up in multiple times in the presentations. Just an observation, well, it's not just an observation really, it's a bit of amusing. It's a bit of maybe my first challenge. I've heard from a couple of different directions now that existing qualifications, training courses are winding down, they're not getting the support, they're not really viable, and that they're just kind of not being supported. And I'm really quite surprised because of the responsibilities. Again, in the AO world, it's quite cut and dry, but I think it applies wider. Because of the responsibilities that we take on when we assess our own staff, in the absence of any other certification, I'm kind of surprised we haven't seen the use of qualifications and outside trainers growing, supporting those people that we know are awesome at what they do. I can't name names right now. It's kind of a concern to me if that's affecting first aid and core technical skills. Discuss amongst yourselves, are we killing off the providers that should have actually grown and enhanced the competency of our outdoor leadership over the last 5 years? Don't know. The radar, how are we going?
Pretty good.
The radar. Yeah, again, conscious of who most of you are and where you're placed in your organisations, this may be more about just rolling it down to your operational teams. Something, again, I'm getting some phone calls and conversations where I'm starting to wonder whether the systems that are in place that I now understand doing a good job of capturing incidents where things go splat, are we also capturing the near misses, and in particular the splats and near misses that didn't happen in my operation but are 100% relevant? I'm just trying to remember what the next slide is, whether it links through. But near misses should be far more interesting in a way than the hits. And again, I suspect some of the organisations represented here will be really alert to this. Maybe touch base with your operational teams, your people on the ground. Are we getting good reporting of that? And I bumped the slide. Oh, sorry, before that. That actually links with the poor old National Incident Database. And my question of, are we doing enough to remember and share the learnings? If you're in the AAO world, you may start to hear your auditors asking, do your technical advisors know the landmark incidents that show you what can go wrong in operations like yours? These landmark cases, well, the immediate causes are mostly predictable, like the immediate cause of why I lost my mast. I think that the technical advisors, they're your sort of rock ones, bush ones, senior instructory types. If it's a concern to me when I have them on the phone and they're saying, no, I've never heard of an incident in Mangatapopo, where is that? I've never heard of, Line Bay, I kind of get it because it's on the other side of the planet, but it's super relevant to a lot of what we do. And it's super relevant, unfortunately, to a fatality that's happened in this country somewhat recently. Losing a mast is one thing, but we're talking about bigger consequences, really. And what's the next? Oh, this one is a lot, I can finish it a lot quicker because of the stellar work and input from Sam, Grant and others this morning. What I've done here is I've resurrected a slide from 18 months ago when many of us were up at Merck. And I put this up because from my desk I'm in a slightly weird and neat position where I'm just out of the sector a little bit at the moment, and I was feeling bolshy and I threw out a challenge. Back in the pre-regulations day, Department of Labour described the sector as fragmented. And I asked, well, is that the case? Or are we doing something else? Not many of us are keen on becoming Borg, whatever numbers, And I'm really encouraged by some of the work that's happened over the last 12, 18 months about bringing together not just the neighbouring tribes having a feast and then going away to go back to doing your tribal things, but actually having a council of allies and a strategy that works together. The other thought that went through my head, and maybe it's a bit topical, is are we doing what's healthy for our whole ecosystem, or just what's healthy for my tribe in the short term, or profitable for the tribe in the short term? But all of that has been covered so beautifully by others this morning that I will move on a lot quicker. Good day.
It'll be quickly.
Yeah, I told you I was going to make people happy. I do have a couple of others prepped in case I get a question that I might be anticipating, but it may not happen today. So, with the incentive of lunch, you don't have any questions, do you?